So now we get into fiber. All kinds of buzzes about fiber. We need a fiber community. We're going to get a gigabit community. We're going to get a Google bit community. So we talk about all the scenarios where fiber is utilized. Well, I think you just heard through some of our conversations that fiber is often utilized to a degree in some of these other technologies. We're going to talk about that here in a second. But basically, fiber optic technology is converting an electrical signal and is carrying data in form of light through a very, very small piece of glass. It's about the size of a human hair. Okay? The data speeds that are transmitted over fiber far exceed DSL and cable modem speeds just because of the medium. You're using the glass versus you're using a copper medium. So you can put so much data down there. In fact, the cool thing is about fiber, we don't know what the limitations on fiber are yet. The research and development that's going into the optics or the lasers that power the fiber, we haven't reached the limitations yet. It's just how much more research and development are going to go into them. But the medium itself, the actual fiber optic cable, we haven't experienced what its limitation will be. We have 100 gig deployments out there, very common now. In fact, even in the state of Nebraska, multiple providers are providing 100 gig services over this fiber optic medium. So we have no idea yet where the potential for fiber can go. But the actual speed that you're going to get, it may sound good, hey, I want that 100 gig speed at my house. Well, my first question is what we're going to use it for. But the next question is what kind of technology will be utilized to provide that fiber? So that and the fiber deployment architecture depend upon what your actual speed that you'll get over fiber is. The variations in the technology also depend. You know, we talked about fiber to the node when you're doing ADSL deployment. So you take fiber out to a node and then you do DSL from there. We've talked about fiber to the curb. All those are forms of fiber deployment. You're just taking a different medium off the end of it. So really both DSL and DOCSIS in certain cases can be categorized as fiber to the X. What is this fiber to the X? Fiber to the X is a generic term for any broadband network that's utilizing fiber somewhere within its architecture. So we have fiber to the premise, and that's where you're taking fiber all the way to the end premise. You have fiber to the node, which is an example of DSL or DOCSIS, where deployments are facilitated with fiber serving a node. It's serving some location, then the traditional legacy architecture and facilities are used to the end subscriber. Or you have fiber to the curb. This is where you're taking fiber into kind of a block or a neighborhood, and then the very last mile segment is utilized for higher speed over the existing facilities. Okay, next one. So here's kind of an image that shows what that means. You'll see on the left we have this blue, and then on the right we have this kind of ugly yellow. The blue shows where the optical fiber terminates, and the ugly yellow shows where the traditional legacy facilities were. So you have your metallic cables at greater than 1,000 foot for your fiber to the node, all the way down to you're going to the individual residence or the individual subscriber for fiber to the home. And those are the variances thereof. Okay. So really the true fiber to the premise technologies, there's two that are commonly used today. One is PON, passive optical network, and the other is active Ethernet. Now, passive optical network basically provides the same kind of concept that we talked about with DOCSIS. It's shared. The entire PON or 1/32 split, and that means you have one fiber that can be split passively, no active electronics, that can serve 32 individual subscribers. And traditionally, at the most commonly deployed bandwidths, that's 2.4 gigabits per second down and 1.2 gigabits per second up. And that's the bandwidth that's available in a traditional PON. Now, there are PON deployments out there, and there are readily available equipment that are providing 10 gigabits per second down and 2.5 gigabits per second up with PON technology, still utilizing a 1/32 split. So that gets back to that whole fiber is so cool because we don't know what its limitations are yet. The other common deployment for fiber to the premise is active. And active is where each individual customer has a dedicated fiber that goes to them. In those scenarios, the typical deployment today is for that fiber to be deployed in a 1 gigabit per second symmetrical fashion. So you have 1 gigabit per second up, 1 gigabit per second down. Probably the big buzzword that everyone's heard over the course of the last year or so is gigabit communities. there's your concept. You get gigabit communities where you're providing 1 gigabit per second down and up over this optical medium. Now, sometimes the subscribed data rate will be less than that, but ultimately, if the customer was willing to subscribe to a full 1 gigabit per second service, they could get it over this medium. It's capable. The other service that's available over the fiber to the premise is dedicated Ethernet, and this is kind of the Cadillac. This is your high-end business that really needs to move that data, needs to have that interactive two-way, can get up to 10 gigabits per second symmetrical. We have customer base in the state of Nebraska right now that are receiving 10 gigabit per second symmetrical services, and that is, if your business is really broadband dependent, if you have the need for up as much as you do down, if that data is very important to your business, that's the type of service, that's the Cadillac service that's out there.